Hey guys, so this video idea actually came from Nostalgia Nomics, a video he did a day ago. He was talking about looking at the cards that are going to go out of rotation next year before they start moving. And I thought that was a really smart angle. So I wanted to take the same idea but go like deeper in the research. I went through 26 of the most expensive chase cards from the next rotation block, which is Temporal Forces, Twilight Masquerade, Shrouded Fable, Stellar Crown, Surging Sparks, and Prismatic Evolutions. I looked at the last year of price history for each one and then sorted them into 3 buckets: top picks, Watchlist, and pass. So from there, I narrowed it down to the 7 cards that I think have the best mix of upside, chart structure, and the entry quality right now. So what I was really looking for were cards that already corrected but built the base and maybe are only starting to improve. And what I wanted to avoid were the obvious traps. So the huge recent spikes, the failed breakouts, or cards that just look weak, that there's no real demand. And obviously, guys, this is just my opinion. This is my research, the chart data I went through. It's not financial advice, so always please do your own research. So with that said, this is my top 7 cards to buy before the next rotation in April next year. So let's get into it. At number 7, I have Perrin from Twilight Masquerade. And just quickly, the chart I'm showing here is in USD, since that's how price charting displays it. What I like about Perrin is that it spent a long time building a base in the $60 to $70 range. And then once it started moving up, it actually held those gains. So as you see here in March, and then it held. So that's important because a lot of cards, they can spike for a month or two, but not that many cards can move into a higher range and actually stay there. And then more recently, so this month, Perrin has pushed around to $100. So the chart is clearly still strong. The reason I only have it at number 7 is because this one doesn't feel super early anymore. I still like it, but part of the move has already happened. So from an entry perspective, I think some of the cards higher on the list look a little bit better. So overall, it's a really solid chart, just not the earliest entry anymore. At number 6, I have Umbreon EX from Prismatic Evolutions, the Sunbreon. This one had a really big decline from the early high. It started all the way up at around 1700, and then over the next several months it dropped all the way down into the mid 800s. So obviously that first part of the chart is not pretty, but after that the card stabilized. It found support. It spent a few months more or less building a floor around the 1000 range, and then more recently it started moving higher again. So that's the part I like. The reason I don't have it higher is because the Umbreon, it already looks like it started making its move. So yes, the chart has improved, and yes, the demand is obviously very strong because it's Umbreon. And but from an entry perspective, it doesn't feel quite as early as some of the cards above it. So I still like it, but I think the easy entry was probably earlier in the base. At number 5, I have Pikachu EX, the gold, from Surging Sparks. What I like here is that this card already had a really big decline. It went from 139 all the way down to the really low 50s. So a lot of that early hype already got washed out. Then after that, it stopped falling. It spent a long time building a base around the $50 to $55 range, and that's exactly the kind of setup I like to see. Because when a card just sits there for a while and it holds the same area over and over again, that usually tells me that the market is starting to find a real floor, you know? And now recently it just started moving up a little bit again with the current price around $61. So that's what makes this one interesting to me. It's not a crazy breakout, it's not some huge spike. It just looks like a washed out card that might be starting to wake up. And on top of that, it's Pikachu. So the demand is obviously a big plus. So overall, I really like this one because it still feels early and the risk reward looks pretty solid from here. At number 4, I have the Eevee EX from Prismatic Evolutions. What I like here is that this card already went through a long decline. So it started the year around 190, 200 range, and then over the next several months, it dropped all the way down to roughly 104, 115. So again, a lot of the early hype already got washed out, but then the chart started to change. Once it got down in that lower range, it stopped falling. It started to build a base, and then more recently it pushed higher to around 137. So that's the part I really like, because this isn't just a card that looks cheap now. It's a card that actually looks like it may be starting to recover. And on top of that, it's Eevee. So the demand is there too. So overall, this one stands out to me because of the correction that's already happened. And the floor looks pretty real. And now the chart is finally starting to improve. At number 3, I have Pikachu EX from Surging Sparks, the Booty Chew. So what I like about this one is that it already had a major correction. The card started out way higher, around the 460s, and then over time it came all the way down into the roughly 250s, 260s. And what stands out to me is that once it got down there, it kept finding support in the same area over and over again. So that's really important. Because repeated support usually gives me a lot more confidence than just one random bounce. So when I look at this chart, I see a card that already corrected, found a believable floor, and still hasn't had some huge crazy breakout yet. And of course, again, it's Pikachu. So we know the demand is always there. So overall, this is one of the stronger setups for me because the base looks real. The downside already happened and the entry still looks pretty reasonable from here. At number 2, I have Espeon EX from Prismatic Evolutions. What I really like here is that this card had a major decline first. It started roughly in the 370, 375 range, and then over time it dropped all the way down, man, into 190, 210 area. So a lot of the earlier hype already got washed out. But then instead of just continuing lower, more recently it just pushed up again into the 230s. So that's why I like this chart so much, because it gives you both parts of the setup. You have the long base, which is great, but now you also have the first real sign of improvement, and it still doesn't look too overextended. So overall, Espeon stands out to me because it already corrected, but it had a clean floor, and now it looks like it may be starting to the next move even higher. At number 1, I have the Sylveon EX from Prismatic Evolutions. What I like most here is how clean the setup is. The card started much higher, up around the 462 range, and then over time it came all the way down in that roughly 300 to 325 range. And then so the correction already happened, but the really important part is what came after that. Once it got down into that lower range, it basically stopped falling. It spent a long time consolidating around the 300s, and it never had some huge spike that made the chart look overheated. And that's exactly the kind of setup I like. So because to me, this looks like a card that already corrected, it built a real floor, and then it still feels early, you know. And obviously, being Sylveon helps too. It's one of the better evolutions in my opinion. So overall, this is my #1 pick because I think it gives the best mix of demand, chart structure, and the entry quality out of the whole group. So a few cards that just missed the final list for me were the Ghastly from Temporal Forces, the Greninja EX from Twilight Masquerade, and also the Eevee from Twilight. I think all three were interesting, but for me, they didn't quite have the same balance and the setup quality and the entry as my top 7. And on the other side, there were a few cards that I specifically passed on. The big examples were the Bulbasaur and the Squirtle from Stellar Crown. Not because I think they're bad cards. I actually think they're great cards. I love the art. But because they already had like a really like big spike recently. And like this video, I wanted to not chase the cards like after they had a big spike that happened. So yeah, that same idea applied to other cards as well. If the chart already looked overheated or if it still looked weak with no real recovery yet, I didn't want to force it into the final list also. And then just a reminder, the chart data that I was showing on the video is in USD because that's how price charting displays the charts. I couldn't change the currency of the chart. What I'm gonna do from here is track all of these cards going forward in a spreadsheet, and I'm gonna do a monthly update so we can see exactly how the top picks and the watch list and the past cards perform over time up until they go out of rotation. And honestly, I think this is going to be the most interesting part because it's one thing to make picks like today, and it's another thing to come back and later and see if if the framework actually worked. So obviously, this is just my opinion on the research and the chart data that I went through. The data is the data, but this is not financial advice. So always do your own research. If you want more videos like this, more Pokemon updates, more singles, more sealed investing ideas, more data-driven breakdowns, just subscribe to the channel and let me know. So let me know in the comments which card you think should have made the list or which one you think is the best buy before next year's rotation. And that's it. Yeah. See you in the next one. Ciao, guys.